So this is the ugly side of the old school style resin kits, right? Which predates 3D printing. It's not fun really, because oftentimes what'll happen is that you just get an air bubble in the casting or whatever. And resin is the worst material to try and fill. It's not the prettiest to paint either, but if you clean it up good with light sandpaper and put a good thin primer, you got to be careful too. Like, see this here? Like, you don't want to bust the part out. You do that and you break off a detail part. So where you can clean it up, like these little webs out of here, you might want to do it while it's mounted on the standoffs. But you can see. So I got 2 of these kits, like in case I mess up. But that, I'm not going to snip that with my cutters. But what I will do is I'll be a bit of a butcher here, and I'll just, there you go. And then this is really cool, these Skidder blades. So this you can sort of snap off, but it's risky. As long as the part that's breaking away is thicker, which it was, thank goodness. So anyway, yeah, so I'm going to clean that up. And then this, I got to build the rams for this. Some of the parts of the rams in the kit are really gross. Like, they're just another blob of resin, which I can make or scratch build with evergreen tubing and aluminum rod. They do give you some aluminum rod, but yeah, so I mean, there's potential there for a good model if you're into kit bashing a bit and adding some of your own details, you know what I mean? So this goes like this, and then this, the grapple. This is actually quite good for old style cast resin. You can see how, you know, it pivots, but you got to be very careful when you clean up this knuckle here. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts for this part of the model. And then notice the pins here. I just use, this is 30 thou evergreen plastic, and then I just take a lighter, I think I've mentioned this before, and just put a little mushroom head on the end of the dowel. And after you do a few, you get the hang of it. And then when you pull them in, they look really nice. They make a nice rivet head. And then you just glue the rivet head to the part, because it's not going to come out then. You just basically just nip it off, and you're good to go. Okay. Okay, so here's a little bit of a closer look at this Skidder kit. So where do I begin with this? Because like, I had to make so many parts here. Like, let me just show you, like, here's the rear half of the chassis. So it pivots here like this. So I had to make these rams because the ones that are in the kit, they're just brutal. They're just blobs of resin, you know. Like, this type of resin models was the thing back in the 70s. It sort of started off with, well, Oliver Linden was mostly responsible for in the military modeling, but the model railroad culture sort of caught on to it too. And, you know, a lot of the models were really good. Like, they are good, like, if you put the work into them. You can hide a lot with paint. Now, some would say, well, you can't hide a poor model with paint. Yes, you can, in smaller scales. Like in 187 scale. You can't in 135th, 148. Yeah. I mean, okay, with locomotives, there's a standard already set, but when it comes to stuff like this, you'd be surprised what you can do with some paint. You know, a little bit of paint skill can hide, you know, the lack of integrity on a model, I guess. But these kind of things are important. You can see that with this particular part, what I did was I glued them in place. Like, once I got it all articulated, it was quite loose and a little bit wobbly. due to the just the resin and trying to get the holes accurate for the pins. I'll show you on this one in a second. So I know that this is where the arm's going to be because the grapple, on the other hand, I didn't glue. Like I'm going to leave the grapple articulated. Like it has a 6-way articulation here. See? And this way, and then it pivots, and then the actual grapples work as well, which is kind of nice. But I drilled these out. It was a little bit of work cleaning this up, but I drilled them out and pinned them. And what I do is I just use, well, I'll show you on this one here. So this'll, like this goes on here like this, see? And then the grapple opens up for grabbing the logs, and then this arm goes up and down, and then you have this kind of pivoting action. Like the knuckle is really neat, the way it's all articulated. So I'll be able to stow this on a low bed truck or a flat car, which is nice. So I have still, so the arm is fixed. As they say, if you make a model with moving parts, the part will either get lost. If it becomes an heirloom or you hand it down, you always end up with a model with a missing part because it was made with moving parts. So if the model's going to be static display and you don't need moving parts, you're better off just fixing them in place. That's just my opinion on the matter because I built a lot of models and I know I've lost parts whenever they're loose or people will grab them and they break off. So here, like I'll just show you with this, like these were just sort of started off with crude ideas. Like when I made these rams, there's just some flat stock 80 thou by 20 and I just pinched on 2 pieces onto a piece of 40 thou rod. And then basically, you know, I just mark and then drill a hole, like I keep it proud. And then when I drilled the hole, I just basically snip off. The problem with doing small parts like this on camera is your fat hands and the tools get in the way, so it doesn't make for good video, right? So I round off like that, and then what I do, and then what happens is I end up with this. Here, I'll show you with this one. See, there's a push rod for the ram. It's drilled out and then filed round. And then this gets drilled out, this 3/32 stock. And then this clevis goes over top of that journal on the blade lift bar. And then what I do is I take a lighter like I've done before and I just melt the end and form a rivet head. Now I'll have to cut that off shorter, but I'll just show you just to give you an idea. And that goes in like that. And then you can see how that works. So this is going to get hidden behind the wheel, right? Oh, here I'll show you this side. So the monster truck wheel, because that's what monster trucks are, right? They're skidder chassis. So this goes on like that. The blade can still go up or down, so I'll leave that articulated so that when I posture it for whatever state I want to build it in the end, after I paint it, then I'll deal with that. But you can see how, and I use a brass pin for this. You can see how that articulates. Another wheel goes on here. It's fun doing dry runs with these models when you start getting them together. It's kind of cool, right? It's part of the fun, isn't it? So that'll leave off as a separate part. I'll leave this as a separate part to paint, and then I'll leave the wheels off too. But there you kind of have an idea there. All right. It's nice, eh? It's a nice skidder model, a Tigercat, I believe it is, and should look really nice on a low bed or a flat car load. Okay. Okay, how's everybody doing? So I just want to take you a little bit further with this, what I believe is a Tigercat skidder. I mean, it looks like one. I don't know whoever built this model. Like, I studied photos of just some stuff on Google Images and so on. I mean, it looks like an old Tigercat. And what's interesting about these, like, believe it or not, like, I'll just talk about the tires for a second here, and then I'll show you how I'm going to paint this, like the preliminary paint stage. Like, I saw like a guy review a real skidder online, and he told, like, it was like like a few years ago, and the tires were from the 60s. Like the tires that they made back in the 60s, they were just superior to anything made today. I mean, maybe it's just the type of tire. Like these are Skidder tires. So, but it blew me away. There was even cracks in them, and they were still good, the guy said. You know, just the rubber was so good, the quality, and so thick that they're almost like impervious to any kind of abuse, really, than just normal wear. So these are the resin tires, right? I got to paint the back rims here yellow by hand. But I just finished putting this wash on. Like, I'll show you how easy these were, like, to get this look, right? It's really simple. Like, the one thing I noticed about painting, like, the more you paint and the older you get, and this happens to me all the time. Like, I never really know how the model's going to turn out because I always feel like I'm learning things. Like, paints have changed over the years. And, you know, I mean, I'm not, look at my thumb, it's dusty. A little protest from Dusty there over a video there I did last week. But anyway, so I just painted these rubber black, like with this Tamiya XF85 rubber black, okay? But I find that the more you paint, like the more you realize how simple it really is, like in terms of layers. Like, you know, I always talk about layers. I think the more layers you do, the more you learn, but the more you paint, the less layers you use. I don't know if that sounds or makes sense, but it's kind of the way it is. Like when I was painting these tires, I thought, oh, I got to do this, that, and that. And I had like 4 colors. Earth, I'll just show you this one in a sec. But I just took them out of the equation. All I did was paint this rubber black. Like I'll show you how I did the yellow in a second. And then I just sprayed them down, like practically dipped the tire in water. And then I just put washes of this Vallejo 71.131 concrete, right? Thin, let it dry. Like I did it 2 or 3 times. And then I would just, like when it was still wet, I had to sort of rotate them by hand, like in front of a fan until they dried within, yeah, I don't know, 5 minutes. And that's the way they turned out. And I was like, okay, you know, I can live with that. And then with these rims, I just took a hole punch and cut, this is 10 thou plastic. And then it obviously wasn't large enough, but I used a compass or just the end of a tool or something, got the hole close, and then used some rolled up sandpaper and rough out just to get it so that it would fit over the rim. And then I just sprayed this yellow, which is Tamiya. It's just Tamiya flat yellow with a bit of orange, just to give it that kind of orangey yellow tint. And then I just put a wash of raw umber or dark brown or whatever, and that's it. Like if I added any more colors or washes to this, it would probably get worse. Like that's what I mean. Like I find that the less I think about it and the less I do, once I got the sort of paint to where I want it, which is almost always thin, everything turns out pretty good. So I just want to show you this grapple, and then I'll show you how I paint this, at least half of this, like the early stages. So this is like the grapple, right? So that was, I'm going to show you this yellow over this dark brown, like, because that's the way this one started out. And I'm really pleased with the way this happened. But, you know, most of this work here is with the airbrush, just like 2 layers. Like the dark brown and then just building up yellow, which I'm going to show you, that I use really high pressure in close with a tiny amount of paint, but high pressure to push the paint past the needle in a small, tiny orifice opening. And it's just a cheesy airbrush too. Okay, so, and then I'm going to show this on the final stage before the paint's done. This is where I wetted it all down, and then I just started using Vallejo, like yellow and white, like just, and then rust, thin washes of rust, right? Just building up layers, and that's how it turned out, okay? So let's put this here and this here, and let me show you how I lay on this yellow paint. Okay, with the airbrush first. And I find the Tamiya is a really good base layer to build on, like to come at it later with just water-based paints and washes, because the water-based Vallejos won't eat through the Tamiya because there's no IPA in the Vallejo, okay? So here it is, like this is just this dark umber brown, okay? You can see I did some of the choker cables hanging off. Like those will get picked out and show later, but as I paint this, you'll see how this starts to come into form. So I'm not worried about spraying like on these chrome like rams. Like I'll pick those out by hand with a small brush, and I'll be able to pick out details and fix flaws or overspray with like by hand, okay? And in fact, you almost want a little, like a little bit of overspray. So I'll show you. Okay, so let's just start on the sides and the top here, okay? So notice how close I am. And see how this is just air? No paint, right? Like floor it, like there. Like that's 60 PSI, believe it or not, okay? And this airbrush is almost 30 years old, and I've never changed the tip. It's like a nail, thick like a nail, okay? Except the orifice liner on it hasn't worn out quite yet, and it does shoot a little bit off at an angle, but I'm used to that. And then this is a siphon feed, so the upper cup won't be in the way like where my finger is. Okay, so now when I go like this, I'm just going to think in my mind. I'm going to pull it back, but I'm going to do a little bit right here first, okay? Just to get the paint going. See there? Okay, so now I'm going to basically come in close like this, and I'm just going to, like, this is really thin, this yellow, but I'm just going to, like, see how it just splattered a bit there? That's fine. That'll go away once the paint begins to flow. In fact, I almost desire that, because if I leave some of that and I do other washes, it'll actually look, I wonder if I can repeat that on this side. Oh yeah. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get in close here, and I'm just going to, tiny amount of paint. This is probably a little bit too heavy now, if it splatters a bit like that with this high pressure, but that's okay, because this is a weathered cat, right? So let's do the top of this. Yeah, this paint's a little bit heavier, but I'm going to keep going with it. Because like I say, don't look, like if things are not going your way, don't sweat it too much, because it is a weathered machine, right? I'm going to leave the bottom. See how it's dark? I'm going to worry about the bottom later. Like I just want to get the high sides where the light would generally hit the model. I'm going to go here. And a little bit of light here. Like, see how it picks off the details there? See that? I'm not shooting much paint really, right? You know what I mean? I probably have more on the paper here. So let's shoot down in here and see what happens just a little bit. Okay, so here's the rear half of the grapple chassis assembly, and I basically did the same thing. Here, I'll just pull this off. Right, so we've painted that. You can see, like, so this was the dark brown. Remember, let's refresh. That's it, just all dark brown paint, the whole thing. And then with the yellow, I just oversprayed. I did a little bit tiny more off camera, but I just want to point something out. Like with the one color that you're using in the airbrush, in this case Tamiya, that's heavily thinned with IPA, IPA being the acronym for isopropyl alcohol at 99% strength in my case. The longer you stay, like when you put on the first dust coat, it dries within like 30 seconds, or like it's good to go, like to handle everything. That's what I love about acrylic, especially IPA based, because it causes the paint to dry even faster. And if it's super thin and there's good pressure, it's always going to be wet when it goes on. Another reason why I use high pressure. Not the only one, but there is reasons to my madness. So when I come back and I do that again with the same thin paint, like I don't change the consistency of the paint. Like in this case, the paint was a bit, or when I first started, was a bit too heavy, and then I went back and thinned it off camera. Always see, like even I have that problem. I don't thin my paint enough. This is the one thing that I'll say it again, and I know I repeat stuff on my content, but you have to with social media, because you can't contain everything in one video. You have to invest in the channel if you want to learn methodology and basic painting fundamentals. And I try to keep them, like actually dumb them down, because I want beginners to just learn the basics. You can develop and refine your style any way you want, right? I'm just showing basic ways that's actually quite easy to do with the method that I use for, like, anyone can do it if you try, like if you invest the time and practice into it. So I come back 2 or 3 times with the same thin paint and it gets brighter and brighter, right? Like if I did this again, it would be even more brighter, right? So at some point you just say, okay, looks good. I took a little bit of rust, super thin, like I'm not even going to say thin anymore, just tinted IPA. And I'll show you what I did with the blade, because I want to show you, like just in this episode before I move on, I want to show you how I do the rusty front blade like that, which is also very basic. So dark brown, right? The base coat brown, spray airbrush, then the yellow, and then a little bit of rust. That's it. Like this is good enough, actually, for me, really. Like in 187 scale, like it'll do, right? But you know how it is, right? We want to take it further. We want to make our models have more integrity and color and so on. Much like in the same way that this grapple, like this grapple's done, but I touched it up with yellows from this line of Model Air, okay? Now, let me just show you what I did here. So I did the same thing as that rear part of the chassis, right? Dark brown, right? And then yellow dusted over, just light dusting, like that's it, right? Like look what that does. Like it is amazing when you think about it. That's like, this is what I mean, right? Like I want to dumb it down so that people can see, like demystify this black art, myth, right? About painting, right? And then that's not to depreciate people that are, advanced or master painters, that you can do whatever you want. The larger the scale, the more challenging it can become, but it can be very challenging to do small models, like small scale as well, to create the same illusion. It's different. It doesn't translate the same way. Like when you go from 1/35th scale to 187, it's a little bit different application, right? Like there's another learning curve there. So with this blade here, you know what I did here? So this was the yellow over the dark brown, that was it. Then this is another reason why I use thin paint. So I took this here was IPA with a bit of white and pink. Faded pink or whatever you call it, but I call it mauve of different tones whenever I mix. I just have a generic name called mauve, the same way I call black and red, brown, raw umber Tamiya. People say, well, where is the raw umber Tamiya? Tamiya doesn't make raw umber. No, you make it. Right? You learn to mix your own colors that way. Black and brown, give or take, it doesn't matter. 60-40, 50-50, as long as it's dark brown. Then I put the yellow over it. And then, so what I did was I took this, which is almost all IPA, high pressure, right? And I get in spray and I spray it so it starts to get wet. And the IPA starts to cut the yellow away and reveal the brown underneath, and it mixes together, and that's what you get. That pinky, like really good base coats for rust. And then now what I'm going to show you is, now that the airbrush work is over, no IPA goes on this ever again. It's just water-based or oils. That's the beauty of this base fundamental painting, right? Simple, fast. You can achieve 50% of the model really done in like 5 minutes. I'm not kidding you, right? Like that's all it takes. It seems longer on video because I'm trying to describe it. So what I did here is I just wet, like I like to spritz the model. Like I just wet like that. The trick is lots of water. And then I took a little bit of this silver, just a tiny little bit, right? And just put a wash on the blade. But I already did that ahead of time because I want to show you these other colors in closing here. So you can see how it's wet, right? So here's an example of what I'll do. And it's never really choreographed, like it's always going to be different. I just grabbed 3 colors. You can see there's Model Air Light Rust, Model Air Rust, and then Vallejo Burnt Umber, okay? I don't use orange rust, I really do. This is sort of orangey here. So, I mean, I can come in here and go like this. I can put a little bit here. It's wet, right? To make sure that you can see that good. Just let me move this a bit. Okay, so I'm going to put a little bit of this orange in here. I'm just going to stab some on the bottom. Make sure I got lots of water here. Then I'm going to grab some of this other rust, and I'm going to put a couple spots too like this. And then I'm going to grab this burnt umber. Just dab in a bit like this. Right? Okay? Now it's still wet, right? Now watch, I'm going to do this. Watch, I take the spritzer, I'm going to go boom, boom, boom. I'm going to just let that run out and dry and leave it, and it's good. Okay, a little bit of detail work here. It kind of goes on and on, doesn't it? You know, like this is the part where when you're alone and you're just really getting into it is, I find, the most pleasurable part of the model, when you can sort of see the end coming and you're just doing the final details. You can see I've laid on a bunch of decals. Now there are no decals with this kit, so I just made up my own. I just did Tigercat here because that's what this is. I'm not entirely sure on the model of it, but I made it into a 620E. It just looked about the size of a 620E Detroit Cummins, right? So also with the windows, you can see I just used gloss varnish. This works just as good as, like, I use GAC 500, gloss varnish. It's all the same. It's all acrylic emulsion of some form of matte, semi-gloss, high gloss, etc. It's all has the same base product, like acrylic product. It's just that they all have, obviously, with paint, pigment, colors, and then gloss varnishes, whatever, right? Okay. So what I'm going to do with this is put screens on here, and I'll show you one that I'm going to put on there. So this is why you need an airbrush, because how are you going to paint, like in this case, see there? Stainless steel photo etch. How are you going to paint it without an airbrush? So, and I painted these black and then just hit them with a dusting of rust. So this is going to go on here. This is to protect the operator from being impaled by a baseball bat sized tree trunk. And I'm going to take a little bit of matte medium, and this is what I love this stuff for. Somebody also mentioned about, you know, how do you clean your brushes? Well, just water. And if they get a little stiff from the acrylic, just soak them in isopropyl alcohol for an hour or so and just flush them out. You can probably use canopy glue on this as well if you're going to flat coat. So I'll just get that bottom done first, and then I'll just let that tack up, and then I can just wick in . I'll just wick in down the other sides later. Wow, that looks really good there. It's just sort of black. I used rubber black and then just a little bit of rust overspray. So that's why the window glazing doesn't matter that much. So you'll see a little bit of glint of light from certain angles, and you'll know it's a window, right? And then there's some on the side as well that I'll add. I did an extra one. This is just N scale photo etch, like just from a hobby shop, the detail section. Any photo etch will do if you think it's going to match or work. So this is N scale fencing by models in detail or whatever, or just some scrap I had kicking around. You can see the profile of it there. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do, start adding that, and all the other stuff like the tires, they're all done, they're ready to go. And then I'll flat coat this and then put her together. She should look pretty cool. Okay. Okay, so what I want to do is just show you how I paint these wooden decks here for the scale trains, flat cars, these trailer trains, these are the best there is, like this class of HO scale trailer train flat car. This is as good as they get. So you can see how I've pretty much weathered this up now. I like to just paint the whole car with umber, like the whole thing. I know that sounds crazy, but for those of you that know, I just super thin Tamiya, just paint it all down. And then I use brushes and IPA. I just start wiping it away and removing it. Cleaning a brush, cleaning, removing, cleaning. Can fly pretty quick doing this too if you really get into it. You can see here I've left all this here. Why? Because when I put these deck pieces on, it'll cover that all up and it'll just leave some of that metal exposed, like the chain chocks. We have chain chocks down these channels here, see? This sits in here like this. And they have these hard points, you know, every 6 feet or so on the deck, or every 4 feet probably. And then they just run chains off them to hold down heavy equipment, etc. So I just want to show you how to paint these. Really easy. These are really easy to do. You can just put some dark umber washes on here and it's pretty much good to go. It's only a flat car. I did the dark umber and then I stripped a lot of it down and then I dusted it down with a really thin, really super thin fade. This is like a super thin buff with white in it. Just to tone down, it helps soften the edges quite a bit. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is just show you the 3 colors that I like to use. These 3 colors right here, like for doing wood, like distressed wood and so on. In this particular case, you got wooden deck tan XF78, and you got buff XF57, and then deck tan XF55. So these 3 colors will do any deck, I mean, it'll make any deck look like weathered wood. You can use the equivalent in other paint colors if you match those roughly, but they don't have to be exact. So what I like to do is cut in 3 different colors. I mean, you don't have to. This is just one color, which was this color here that I did first, XF78. So I'm going to grab this buff now. And what I like to do is make sure IPA, this is 99% isopropyl alcohol, just dip it in here. And I'm just going to run a bead over a plank, like a random plank, see? And it's going to vary in tone, which is what you want. And if you want to go right over top of another one, you can. Just pick out, just pick out the odd plank. Okay? And don't worry if to me it starts to shift after a while when it dries on the lid, and then just add more IPA. And you'll keep getting a varied color shade. And that's kind of what you want. And in the same way for the base coat on these, I used for the same base coat as this. I basically just airbrushed, or you can just use a regular brush. Well, here's my favorite ratty brush I've had since the beginning of Glover Road, like 5 years now. I love this brush. Just paint the whole, like these 3 strips, this dark brown, and then take IPA, like just pure IPA, and then just rub, like put it down on a piece of cloth or whatever, table, and then wipe all the dark brown away. Like, it won't all strip away though. Like, once you stain it, it's not going to come out. But a lot of it will, or half of it will, the strength of it, depending on how strong this is. And you'll get that nice base dark brown like that, like a Douglas fir type aged color that it is. That's usually what a lot of these decks are. So, yeah, so I just basically just get comfortable, and then I'll just run a bead like this. And I find you only need 2 or 3 colors. Well, now this is the 3rd color, right? You get the dark umber, you got the wooden deck tan, and now you got buff going on. This will probably do it. And you want to leave some of those dark ones, like don't cover all the dark ones. But just have fun with it and relax. Put on your favorite podcast, favorite music, whatever, and get into the zone. And before you know it, you will have a flat car. If it's like this, that you'll be proud of. They look awesome, and they don't take a huge amount of work to do. I hope they put out more of these. I know there was a few versions. They're sort of hard to find now, but I hope they do another run of these because they are just beautiful. Okay? Almost forgot to mention this. This is one thing I like to do. This is just a paint, like a felt pen, but a paint pen. And I like to take the edge of these wood plank inserts and black them out. I learned this when I used to be a period ship modeler back in the day. I used to blacken the edge of all the planks And when you'd lay them down, there would just be enough black there to show that sort of tarred rope or whatever they used to, at the time, like caulking, to seal the planks with. It seems minuscule, but you'll notice it when you put it down onto the flat car. You can see the edge of them. And when you actually put them down in place, like there won't be any of that raw wood showing. It just adds an extra, like you don't need a pin wash, right? You don't need a pin wash for any of this because the dark base, see the nail holes? Even when you put the thin to me on, it won't flood into the hole and white it out. So, okie dokie. Okay, time to glue down the wooden deck. So what I do first, it's a two-step process, is I just start it with a bit of medium CA, the purple bottle, medium, and I go about 1/3. You don't want to do it all at once because you might not get the whole deck down flat, and that's important. Oh yeah, make sure you get the nail hole configures right because they're tight. Like see the spacing here? So where they're on the ends is near the end where the flat car is. It's riveted to the angled steel on the outer part of the deck there. So it's always smart to do a bit of a jar and make sure that you know that it's going to lay down flat when you start it on one end and keep it tight to the end. Man, these decks look awesome when they're done like this. It's just the nicest looking flat car you'll ever build in HO scale. Okay, I'll just glue the rest down just like that, and then I'll show you how I'll finish it. Okay, this is just water, so I'm going to show you how I seal this deck in place. And why? Didn't you use super glue? Yes, but super glue is a clamp, right? I'm going to use this matte medium, just put a little blob right here. Oh look, here's a blob from before. Here, I'll show you what I mean. Like, see that? That's matte medium, look at that. When it dries, it never dries brittle. Like, look how it stretches. And it sticks to practically anything. So what I do is I take a bit of water. Let's turn this car. Yeah, let's start in here. And what I do is I just wick in water first, because water is like hydraulic, right? It'll just flow right into every little crack and crevice there is ahead of the matte medium, right? Now, some people have mentioned about matte medium leaving a gray-white film. It will on some colors. It won't always, though. Like, not as often as you think. But when it does, you can always blend it away with a wash of paint. I've never had it really do it on a model like this. See how I grab it now? And I just dab it in like this. And it just capillaries. It chases the water, or the water sucks it in. And the reason why I do this is because if you don't, one day your super glued deck will just pop, because what it does is when it glues down to a painted surface, it forms a scab. It'll hold for a while, but then the paint will pop because the CA is not acrylic. It's a mechanical bond, and it'll harden the paint and cause a blister, and it'll lift when you least expect it. When, I don't know, but they do. CA goes brittle after about 3 or 4 years. Or even less, depending on the humidity and so on. And it'll happen when you go to the show, or like you work a year ahead or something, or you just leave it, and then you have your beautiful contest car that you've worked on, and you're taking it to a show, whatever, right? And then all of a sudden the deck lifts, and now you're hooked, because now you got to pull the whole wood off, and you'll probably destroy it to glue it back down again, like you'll mangle it. Well, this way, you're not going to mangle anything, because this is never going to come off. because it's been clamped with CA, and now you're chasing matte medium into the little grooves. And when it dries, when you're mixing it with water like this, it'll dry totally transparent. Like I say, people have had issues where it leaves a gray film on some things, but just use a wash, like a colored wash. It's acrylic paint. Like, you can put paint into this, any acrylic paint. This is just a carrier for pigment or water or whatever, but only acrylic based stuff. And just in closing on this, if you ever really had to lift this up, you could soak the whole thing in isopropyl and the whole thing would come apart, but you can melt matte medium. I know I go on about it, but if I don't, the new people that come to the channel won't know about it, and it's a lot. It takes me a huge amount of time to answer individual questions about it, so that's why I mention it when I use it. So sorry if I sound like a broken record, but it's professional product. So why is it professional? Like, why not use professional? You don't need to be a professional to use it, but you'll get professional results, okay? So that's what I'm going to do, is I'm just going to keep going in with the brush here with water. And then when I'm done, I'll just throw my brush into a jar of water, and she's good to go. And if my brush ever does get stiff from residual acrylic, I'll just restore it easily with this. Just soak it overnight. All my brushes now, most of them I've used for 5 years now with acrylics, and even though I've left some out to dry by accident, I've been able to restore them back. See that? You can't even see the matte medium really. And when it dries, it's like deck will never lift, and it'll be flat and transparent, and all your colors will be vibrant. Okay? Okay, I want to try and show you how I attach chain in 187 scale or HO scale. Now here's the challenges. If I zoom in any closer, my fat hands will get in the way, and it'll just make for a lousy demonstration. So I'm sorry for those that maybe feel that it's not close enough, but this is the best I can do. So what I do generally is, like, these cars are really nice because they already have the channels here with the chain blocks on them. Like you can sort of see right here. Scale Trains modeled these, but they never modeled all the actual clevis. Come on, Scale Trains. Where's the clevis on the chain chalk or chain block here? No, I'm just kidding. These are excellent cars. Like, they're as good as they get. So see how, first of all, is what I do is I take some of this brass wire here. Okay. 0.015 thou by Model Supplies, number 2505. They give you 4 pieces, 12 inches long. So there's plenty there for doing hooks and things like this. And you can crush this too. If you have a good pair of flat pliers, you can squeeze like the ends down. Okay, now the chain that you see here, this really nice, excuse my hand here, is like that chain is by A-Line, number 29220, black chain. It's already blackened. You can see it's 12 inch, 27 links per inch. Really cool. Like, they have all the different sizes. Okay, A-Line. So these are the 2 items that I use to do the tie downs on this skidder for this flat car model. Okay. Now, what I do is I take, let me just move this out of the way. Excuse my hand if it does get in the way. I'll try to keep it clear. So what I do is I make 4 of these. Like, see these here? Like these little brass, like I make them into like a hockey stick, right? And what I do is I basically use medium CA, okay, to first tack 4 of them in place. Like, I'll put one like this, like in front of the chain block, like this, let's say, perhaps, if that's where I want it, and I just CA that in place. But on this side of the skidder, or the whatever heavy equipment of your choice is I would tend to put it like this here. Okay, CA, so it's on a bit of an angle. Like, see this one, like these here, see how they're facing that way? Okay, so I CA the brass hockey stick in place, and then when that kicks off, I take a little bit of matte medium, pure matte medium, and I just flood it into the channel. Like, the matte medium is acrylic, so it's an awesome adhesive for metal parts on painted parts, because it becomes paint because it is acrylic type of paint, but without pigment. And it'll never come off. Like CA will break eventually, like if you hit it like shear. Like CA is horrible, like if you push, it'll pop sometimes, like after a few years the paint will break away or whatever. But if you chase it with this after it's dry, there's no way it's coming off, okay? So you can see I have two of them right here. I'll show you how I hook this one up. So I slide the link over top of it, see? And it's really strong. Like it'll bend, like if I pull on this even choked up like that, it'll probably bend that brass rod, but it won't pull from the deck, okay? So what I do with this one here that I've already done, I'll try to keep this in view, is I nip off, just leave about 1/8 of an inch or so. And then what I do is I basically, like this was glued last night with matte medium. Like when I put the chain on, I put a blob of matte medium on it. And I basically push it down like that into the channel, see? And then I just put another drop of matte medium and it's good to go. And then you can see right here where I just wrap this chain around and then I'll just drop it down behind the blade, and there's probably a clevis on there of some sort, like whatever way they chose to anchor or fasten that. So once I got that on there, I slide that over. I'll try to do this one here on camera for you. Keep it in view. So I just drop this down through there like so. Okay. And then what I do is I pull on it, because this is dried from last night, plus it's CA'd. I get it tight, and then I grab it like this, and then I grab my, excuse my hand again, I grab my tweezers like this, and just hold it off like that, okay? And then I'll take a little bit of matte medium, okay? And the nice thing about this matte medium in this particular case, like when you flood it in like this, it looks white and milky, but it'll shrink and dry clear, like transparent and completely flat. And it won't like dissipate the detail of the chain over the yellow edge of the blade. Like it just looks so awesome. And you know what? Any scale that you do this in, this method works great. Of course, if you get into the larger scales, like 1/35, 1/16, you can actually do the detail of the clevis, that locking clevis on the chain if you want. So when that's dry, then I'll cut it and wrap it around and drape it down over the blade like that. Okay, so that's how I make these, and they work awesome. And because this is fairly strong now, and this is attached using just a little spot of CA under each tire, and the matte medium as well, sort of wicked in. If I really wanted to take this off, I could just soak that with isopropyl alcohol under the tire. Just soak it, let it sit, soak it, and work it, and it would just pop right off and be very little damage to the model, okay? So this is the last part on the model, this little hydraulic ram that I just have to get in. The reason why I had to do these separate is because it depends on the grapple. If they're wide open, then they're just a short, like you'll just see this little coupler part, because the shoulder of this grapple would be inset, but when they're folded up like this, the little rod would be extended like that, see? So I just made those out of plastic like I did these other ones, and then painted it silver, okay? Okay, so here it is, finished. This is the Resin Unlimited Modern Log Skidder. I presume that this company, Resin Unlimited, is still around. They're in Wisconsin, USA. So, but this is my argument for the brick and mortar store in this online, you know, scourge that everybody thinks that online's the way to go all the time. The brick and mortar store, this is where you find stuff like this. Like, you never find this online, really. I mean, unless it's listed, but you go into a brick and mortar store, if you have the privilege to have one in your community, and you check the peg boards, like for, you know, for me, it's Inner City Trains and Hobbies. Like, they have like pegboard after pegboard of detail parts. And this is where you find this kind of stuff. And like I say, they can appear to be an ugly duckling, but you can turn them into a beautiful swan with a little bit of, you know, scratching and some paint work, you know. And then I just mounted this on a Scale Trains flat car, and I'm really happy with it. I found this little piece of foliage here. I thought that was kind of neat. But so yeah, so this is an ideal subject for the short line model railroad, right? That's why I like to do this kind of stuff. So let's have a look at it in closing up top. Let's go put it on the layout and have a look and see what it looks like, okay?